Flour is a powder which is made by grinding cereal grains, beans, or other seeds or roots. It is the main ingredient of bread, which is a staple food for many cultures, making the availability of adequate supplies of flour a major economic and political issue at various times throughout history. Wheat flour is one of the most important ingredients in European, North American, Middle Eastern, Indian and North African cultures, and is the defining ingredient in most of their styles of breads and pastries. While wheat is the most common base for flour, maize flour has been important in Mesoamerican cuisine since ancient times, and remains a staple throughout the Americas. Rye flour is an important constituent of bread in much of Central Europe, and rice can also be used in flour, though this is relatively uncommon. Etymology: the English word for flour is originally a variant of the word flower. Both derive from the Old French fleur or flower, which had the literal meaning blossom, and a figurative meaning the finest. The phrase fleur de farine meant the finest part of the meal, since flour resulted from the elimination of coarse and unwanted matter from the grain during milling. History: it was discovered around 6000 BC that wheat seeds could be crushed between simple millstones to make flour. The Romans were the first to grind seeds on cone mills. In 1879, at the beginning of the industrial era, the first steam mill was erected in London. In the 1930s, some flour began to be enriched with iron, lysine, thiamine and riboflavin. In the 1940s, mills started to enrich flour and folic acid was added to the list in the 1990s. Degermed and heat-processed flour: an important problem of the Industrial Revolution was the preservation of flour. Transportation distances and a relatively slow distribution system collided with natural shelf life. The reason for the limited shelf life is the fatty acids of the germ, which react from the moment they are exposed to oxygen. This occurs when grain is milled. The fatty acids oxidize and flour starts to become rancid. Depending on climate and grain quality, this process takes 6 to 9 months. In the late 19th century, this process was too short for an industrial production and distribution cycle. As vitamins, micronutrients and amino acids were completely or relatively unknown in the late 19th century, removing the germ was an effective solution. Without the germ, flour cannot become rancid. Degermed flour became standard. Degermation started in densely populated areas and took approximately 1 generation to reach the countryside. Heat-processed flour is flour where the germ is first separated from the endosperm and bran, then processed with steam, dry heat or microwave and blended into flour again. The FDA has been advised by several cookie dough manufacturers that they have implemented the use of heat-treated flour for their ready-to-bake cookie dough products to reduce the risk of E. coli bacterial contamination. Production: milling of flour is accomplished by grinding grain between stones or steel wheels. Today, stone ground usually means that the grain has been ground in a mill in which a revolving stone wheel turns over a stationary stone wheel, vertically or horizontally with the grain in between. Many small appliance mills are available, both hand-cranked and electric. The mill stones frequently rub against each other resulting in small stone particles chipping off and getting into flour, but they are removed before the flour is sold. Modern mills. Roller mills soon replaced stone grist mills as the production of flour has historically driven technological development, as attempts to make grist mills more productive and less labor-intensive led to the watermill and windmill. These terms are now applied more broadly to uses of water and wind power for purposes other than milling. More recently, the Unifine mill, an impact-type mill, was developed in the mid-20th century. Composition: flour contains a high proportion of starches, which are a subset of complex carbohydrates also known as polysaccharides. The kinds of flour used in cooking include all-purpose flour, self-rising flour, and cake flour including bleached flour. The higher the protein content the harder and stronger the flour, and the more it will produce crusty or chewy breads. The lower the protein the softer the flour, which is better for cakes, cookies, and pie crusts. Unbleached flour is simply flour that has not undergone bleaching and therefore does not have the color of white flour. An example of this would be the graham flour. Sylvester Graham was against using bleaching agents, which he considered unhealthy. Bleached flour. Refined flour has had the German bran removed and is typically referred to as white flour. Bleached flour is any refined flour with a whitening agent added. Bleached flour is artificially aged using a bleaching agent, a maturing agent, or both. A bleaching agent would affect only the carotenoids in the flour. A maturing agent affects gluten development. A maturing agent may either strengthen or weaken gluten development. The four most common additives used as bleaching maturing agents in the USA at this time are, potassium bromate, a maturing agent that strengthens gluten development. Does not bleach. Benzoyl peroxide, bleaches. Does not act as a maturing agent, no effect on gluten. Ascorbic acid, maturing agent that strengthens gluten development. Does not bleach. Chlorine gas, both a bleaching agent and a maturing agent, but one that weakens gluten development. Chlorination also oxidizes starches in the flour, making it easier for the flour to absorb water and swell, resulting in thicker batters and stiffer doughs. The retarded gluten formation is desirable in cakes, cookies, and biscuits as it would otherwise make them tougher and bread-like. The modification of starches in the flour allows the use of wetter doughs without destroying the structure necessary for light fluffy cakes and biscuits. Chlorinated flour allows cakes and other baked goods to set faster, rise better, the fat to be distributed more evenly, with less vulnerability to collapse. Cake flours in particular are nearly always chlorinated. There is at least one flour labeled unbleached cake flour blend that is not bleached, but the protein content is much higher than typical cake flour at about 9.4% protein. According to King Arthur, this flour is a blend of a more finely milled unbleached wheat flour and corn starch, which makes a better end result than unbleached wheat flour alone. The end product, however, is denser than would result from lower protein, chlorinated cake flour. All bleaching and maturing agents have been banned in UK. Bromination of flour in the USA has fallen out of favor, and while it is not yet actually banned anywhere, few retail flours available to the home baker are brominated anymore. Many flours packaged specifically for commercial bakeries are still brominated. Retail bleached flours marketed to the home baker are now treated mostly with either peroxidation or chlorine gas. Current information from Pillsbury is that their bleached flours are treated both with benzoyl peroxide and chlorine gas. Gold Medal states that their bleached flour is treated either with benzoyl peroxide or chlorine gas, but there is no way to tell which process has been used when buying the flour at the grocery store. Some other chemicals used as flour treatment agents to modify color and baking properties include chlorine dioxide, calcium peroxide, azotic carbonamide or azobisformamide. Atmospheric oxygen causes natural bleaching. Plain flour, flour that does not have a leavening agent, is called plain or all-purpose flour. It is appropriate for most bread and pizza bases. Some cookies are also prepared using this type of flour. Bread flour is high in gluten protein, with 12.5 to 14% protein compared to 10 to 12% protein in all-purpose flour. The increased protein binds to the flour to entrap carbon dioxide released by the yeast fermentation process, resulting in a stronger rise. Self-rising flour, leavening agents are used with some flours, especially those with significant gluten content, to produce lighter and softer baked products by embedding small gas bubbles. Self-rising flour is sold pre-mixed with chemical leavening agents. The added ingredients are evenly distributed throughout the flour, which aids a consistent rise in baked goods. This flour is generally used for preparing scones, biscuits, muffins, etc. It was invented by Henry Jones and patented in 1845. Plain flour can be used to make a type of self-rising flour, although the flour will be coarser. Self-rising flour is typically composed of the following ratio: 1 cup flour, 1 teaspoon baking powder, a pinch to a 1/2 teaspoon salt. Enriched flour. During the process of making flour, nutrients are lost. Some of these nutrients are replaced during refining, and the result is enriched flour. Common preservatives sometimes added to commercial flour: calcium propanoate, sodium benzoate, tricalcium phosphate, butylated hydroxyinazole, types, wheat flour. Wheat is the grain most commonly used to make flour. Certain varieties may be referred to as clean, or white. Other terms are given to wheat flour depending on its gluten content. Products with a high amount of gluten are identified with terms such as strong, or hard, whereas those with low levels of the protein are referred to as soft, or weak. Brown and wholemeal flours may be made of hard or soft wheat. Other flours. Acorn flour is made from ground acorns and can be used as a substitute for wheat flour. It was used by Native Americans. Koreans also use acorn flour to make dotoramuk. Almond flour is made from ground almonds, suitable for people with gluten-free diets or celiac disease. Amaranth flour is a flour produced from ground amaranth grain. It was commonly used in pre-Columbian Mesoamerican cuisine and was originally cultivated by the Aztecs. It is becoming more and more available in specialty food shops. Atta flour is a whole grain wheat flour important in Indian and Pakistani cuisine, used for a range of breads such as roti and chapati. Bean flour is a flour produced from pulverized dried or ripe beans. Garbanzo and fava bean flour is a gluten-free flour mixture with a high nutritional value and strong aftertaste. Brown rice flour is of great importance in Southeast Asian cuisine. Also edible rice paper can be made from it. Buckwheat flour is used as an ingredient in many pancakes in the United States. In Japan, it is used to make a popular noodle called soba. In Russia, buckwheat flour is added to the batter for pancakes called bunis, which are frequently eaten with caviar. Buckwheat flour is also used to make crêpes bretones in Brittany. On Hindu fasting days, people eat items made of buckwheat flour. The preparation varies across India. The famous ones are kutchu kiparai and kutchu pakaras. In most of northern and western states they call this kutchu ka atta. Cassava flour is made from the root of the cassava plant. In a purified form, it is called tapioca flour. Chestnut flour is popular in Corsica, the par copyright Rigid and Lunigiana for breads, cakes and pastas. It is the original ingredient for polenta, still used as such in Corsica and other Mediterranean locations. Chestnut bread keeps fresh for as long as 2 weeks. In other parts of Italy it is mainly used for desserts. Chickpea flour is of great importance in Indian cuisine, and in Italy, where it is used for the Ligurian farinata. Qua plus or minus O flour made from dried potatoes in various countries of South America. Coconut flour is made from ground coconut meat and has the highest fiber content of any flour, having a very low concentration of digestible carbohydrates makes an excellent choice for those looking to restrict their carbohydrate intake. Corn flour is popular in the southern and southwestern U.S., Mexico, Central America, and Punjab regions of India and Pakistan, where it called as makai ka atta. Coarse whole grain corn flour is usually called cornmeal. Finely ground corn flour that has been treated with food-grade lime is called masa harina and is used to make tortillas and tamales in Mexican cooking. Corn flour should never be confused with cornstarch, which is known as corn flour in British English. Cornmeal is very similar to corn flour except in a coarser grind. Cornstarch is powdered endosperm of the corn kernel. Glutinous rice flour or sticky rice flour, used in East and Southeast Asian cuisines for making tangy yuan, etc. Hemp flour is produced by pressing the oil from the hemp seed, and milling the residue. Hemp seed is approximately 30% oil and 70% residue. Hemp flour doesn't rise, and is best mixed with other flours. Added to any flour by about 15 to 20%, it gives a spongy nutty texture and flavor with a green hue. Maida flour is a finely milled wheat flour used to make a wide variety of Indian breads such as paratha and naan. Maida is widely used not only in Indian cuisine but also in Central Asian and Southeast Asian cuisine. Though sometimes referred to as all-purpose flour by Indian chefs, it more closely resembles cake flour or even pure starch. In India, Maida flour is used to make pastries and other bakery items such as bread, biscuits and toast. Mesquite flour is made from the dried and ground pods of the mesquite tree which grows throughout North America in arid climates. The flour has a sweet, slightly nutty flavor and can be used in a wide variety of applications. Noodle flour is a special blend of flour used for the making of Asian-style noodles. The flour could be from wheat or rice. Nut flours are grated from oily nuts most commonly almonds and hazelnuts and are used instead of or in addition to wheat flour to produce more dry and flavorful pastries and cakes. Cakes made with nut flours are usually called tortes and most originated in Central Europe, in countries such as Hungary and Austria. Peas meal or pea flour is a flour produced from roasted and pulverized yellow field peas. Peanut flour made from shelled cooked peanuts is a higher protein alternative to regular flour. Potato starch flour is obtained by grinding the tubers to a pulp and removing the fiber and protein by water washings. Potato starch is very white starch powder used as a thickening agent. Standard potato starch needs boiling, to thicken in water, giving a transparent gel. Because the flour is made from neither grain nor legume, it is used as substitute for wheat flour in cooking by Jews during Passover, when grains are not eaten. Potato flour, often confused with potato starch, is a peeled, cooked potato powder of mashed, mostly drummed and grinded potato flakes using the whole potato and thus containing the protein and some of the fibers of the potato. Having an off-white slight yellowish color. These dehydrated, dried, potatoes or also called instant mashed potatoes can also be granules or flakes. Potato flour is cold water soluble. However, it isn't used often as it tends to be heavy. Rice flour is ground kernels of rice. It is used in Western countries and especially for people who suffer from gluten intolerance, since rice does not contain gluten. Brown rice flour has higher nutritional value than white rice flour. Rye flour is used to bake the traditional sourdough breads of Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Russia, Czech Republic, Poland and Scandinavia. Most rye breads use a mix of rye and wheat flours because rye does not produce sufficient gluten. Pumpernickel bread is usually made exclusively of rye, and contains a mixture of rye flour and rye meal. Semolina is the coarse, purified wheat middlings of durum wheat used in making pasta, breakfast cereals, puddings, and couscous. Sorghum flour is made from grinding whole grains of the sorghum plant. It is called jawar in India. Spelt, an ancient grain, is a cousin to wheat. But the protein makeup is somewhat different and therefore, spelt flour is often tolerated by people who have mild allergies to certain proteins that develop when gluten is formed in making dough. Spelt dough needs less kneading than wheat dough. Compared to hard wheat flours, spelt flour has a relatively low protein count, just a little higher than pastry flour. That means that plain spelt flour works well in creating dough for soft foods such as cookies or pancakes. Crackers turn out well because they are made from dough that does not need to rise when baked. Tapioca flour, produced from the root of the cassava plant, is used to make breads, pancakes, tapioca pudding, a savory porridge called fufu in Africa, and is used as a starch. Teff flour is made from the grain teff, and is of considerable importance in Eastern Africa. Notably, it is the chief ingredient in the bread injera, an important component of Ethiopian cuisine. More types. Flour can also be made from maize, soybeans, peanuts, arrowroot, taro, cattails, acorns, manioc, quinoa and other non-cereal foodstuffs. Type numbers. In some markets, the different available flour varieties are labeled according to the ash mass that remains after a sample is incinerated in a laboratory oven. This is an easily verified indicator for the fraction of the whole grain remains in the flour, because the mineral content of the starchy endosperm is much lower than that of the outer parts of the grain. Flour made from all parts of the grain leaves about 2 ag ash or more per 100 g dry flour. Plain white flour leaves only about 0.4 ag. German flour type numbers indicate the amount of ash obtained from 100 g of the dry mass of this flour. Standard wheat flours range from type 405 for normal white wheat flour for baking, to strong bread flour types 550, 812, and the darker types 1050 and 1600 for whole grain breads. French flour type numbers are a factor 10 smaller than those used in Germany, because they indicate the ash content per 10 g flour. Type 55 is the standard, hard wheat white flour for baking, including puff pastries. Type 45 is often called pastry flour, and is generally from a softer wheat. Some recipes use type 45 for croissants, for instance, although many French bakers use type 55 or a combination of types 45 and 55. Types 65, 80 and 110 are strong bread flours of increasing darkness, and type 150 is a wholemeal flour. Czech flour types describes roughness of milling instead of amount of ash. Though sometimes a numbering system is used, it is not a rule. Czechs determine following 4 basic types of mill: extra soft wheat flour, fine wheat flour, rough wheat flour and farina wheat flour. Polish flour type numbers, as is the case in Germany, indicate the amount of ash in 100 g of the dry mass of the flour. Standard wheat flours range from type 450 to 2000. In the United States and the United Kingdom, no numbered standardized flour types are defined, and the ash mass is only rarely given on the label by flour manufacturers. However, the legally required standard nutrition label specifies the protein content of the flour, which is also a way for comparing the extraction rates of different available flour types. In general, as the extraction rate of the flour increases, so do both the protein and the ash content. However, as the extraction rate approaches 100%, the protein content drops slightly, while the ash content continues to rise. The following table shows some typical examples of how protein and ash content relate to each other in wheat flour. This table is only a rough guideline for converting bread recipes. Since flour types are not standardized in many countries, the numbers may differ between manufacturers. Note that there is no type 40 French flour. The closest is type 45. It is possible to determine ash content from some U.S. manufacturers. However, U.S. measurements are based on wheat with a 14% moisture content. Thus, a U.S. flour with 0.48% ash would approximate a French type 55. For U.S. bakers of French pastries seeking an equivalent, for example, they could look at tables published by King Arthur Flour, showing their all-purpose flour as a close equivalent to French type 55. Other measurable properties of flour as used in baking can be determined using a variety of specialized instruments, such as the farinograph. Flammability: flour dough suspended in air is explosive as is any mixture of a finely powdered flammable substance with air. Some devastating and fatal explosions have occurred at flour mills, including an explosion in 1878 at the Washburn Mill in Minneapolis, the largest flour mill in the United States at the time. Products: bread, pasta, crackers, many cakes, and many other foods are made using flour. Wheat flour is also used to make a roux as a base for thickening gravy and sauces. It is also the base for papier-mâché and car copyright. Cornstarch is a principal ingredient used to thicken many puddings or desserts, and is the main ingredient in packaged custard. References. External links: Cooking for Engineers, Kitchen Notes, Wheat flour, H2G2 entry on bread flour.